Sean King with Mr. Fence, Tri-State's leading fence installation company. Thank you so much for making the decision to trust us with the installation of your new fence project. Team Blue is going to take care of you. But give me a few moments of your time and I'll show you what to expect with the installation of your new fence. So after your project has been scheduled and the paperwork's completed, the material's been pulled, you're going to have this beautiful sight. A beautiful truck's going to show up in front of your home with your material and your team to build your fence. Team Blue will show up with 3 Mr. Fence team members normally to build your fence. You'll have a foreman and a co-foreman and an installer. Some of the larger projects will also have a laborer with the team as well. Prior to this big beautiful truck arriving, you may find these type of flags in your yard. You're going to find red ones, possibly yellow ones, orange ones in your yard, as well as spray paint in the yard. What these are for, these are utility companies marking where the approximate location of the public utilities are so that we can do the best job we can to avoid hitting those public utilities. So please leave these where they are and wait for our team to remove them. One of the common questions we get asked all the time is, what is the difference between a public and a private utility? Well, let me tell you. If it's a utility line that's coming into your home, in other words, it's providing a service to your home, it's most likely going to be a public utility or a public service at that point. If it is something that's leaving your home, then it's probably going to be a private line. In other words, this utility right here, this is a service providing power to this new home. So that's a public utility. It's providing power into the home. The gas line, which is marked right here on the ground, it comes from the meter in the back. That is providing gas to the home. So that's a public utility. We are liable, all contractors are liable to have those marked and have their own dig ticket number. Because if one of those gets damaged, then we are responsible for those damages. That's on us. But a private utility is something that's leaving the home. That could be a gutter line, like this home has, to a drain. That could also be a sprinkler system. It could be a gas line going to a gas grill. It could be an electric line to a yard barn that you have built. So behind me, one of my team members is hand digging this hole. So he's taking his time to very carefully excavate the hole because we know that there is a gas line right there. So he's going to take his time and do the best job he can not to damage that gas line. It's still possible. He's dealing with a sharp edge object and putting it in the ground and trying to break the dirt free. He could still nick that gas line, but he's going to take his time and try not to. That's why it's very important for you to locate our private utilities, because they're very easy to damage in the ground. And if we don't know they're there, then we're really going to have a hard time not hitting them. Let's talk about where to put your fence. Let's talk about property lines. In this case, this is a new house construction, and we have property pins easily visible to see. Not always that the case. We also have property pin markers. That's generally going to be a wood stake with a pink ribbon on it, indicating that there's a pin buried in the ground near the wood stake. The wood stake does not necessarily mean that's exactly where the property line is. So in this case, we know where the property pin is exactly. Where do we put the fence? Do we put it right on the line, or do we hold it in? Is there a certain offset legally you have to set it in? Well, the answer is, in Evansville, Indiana, in our tri-state and surrounding community, we have no setback that we have to be off the property line. There's no rule that says you have to be 1 foot, 2 foot, 5 foot, 10 foot, or even a few inches. There's no code or ordinance that tells you how far in you have to be, unless there's an easement. If there's a public utility easement, we do have to stay out of the public utility easement. And sometimes those can be as much as 10 and 15 feet into your property line. The only way you're going to know that is by checking a plot plan. The plot plan will have indications with a dotted line that will show you where those easements are at. You can also have drainage easements, so you need to watch out for those as well. But in this case, we have no easements and we see a property pin. We advise you to hold the fence in 2 inches from the finished edge of the fence. So as I look down the fence line, the outside of the fence is 2 inches away from the center of that property pin. The reason why we advise 2 inches is that there's probably human error and tolerances between the location of this pin and our fence. We don't want to touch the property line. If we do, then that becomes a shared fence. Now that becomes a legally shared fence, even if you paid for it. If we split the property line, your neighbor owns half of it, even if they didn't pay anything for it. What that means is they could take it down, they can hang a hammock off it, they can paint it or stain it whatever color they want because it's half theirs. So we strongly urge you to give up the few inches to make sure the fence is completely on your property line. And the other thing you got to keep in mind is you may see the post is clearly inside the property line, but we have a couple of inches of concrete on the outside of that post that technically should also still be on your property and not the neighbor's. So there's two types of wood fence that we offer at Mr. Fence. There's cedar and there's pressure treated. When we say cedar wood fence, we're talking about the pickets, and that's the face of the fence. The post and the rails are still going to be pressure treated southern yellow pine, and that's for strength and longevity. Pressure treated southern yellow pine is guaranteed for life, never deteriorate or rot, but it is more prone to warping, twisting, and cracking. The species alone is a little bit stronger than cedar, and that's why we use it for the horizontal rails. So we use pressure treated pine because of the strength, but we'll also have to worry about the warping and cracking that come along with it. So on a cedar fence, what you should expect is this reddish tint color look to it. You're gonna have a lot of knots in our cedar that we supply. And these knots sometimes will have little checks or cracks that you might call them between the knot holes. And that's to be expected. You might even have some knot holes that might fall out over a period of time. And that's to be expected as well. If that were to happen, you could purchase another board and replace it, or we could replace it for you. You also might have checking in the boards. And that's when between the top or at the bottom, the board will a little bit of a split at the top, okay? You might have some checking there. Generally, the cedar species is going to be more stable, so there'll be less warping or twisting with the board. So it'll be fairly flat and consistent across the face of the fence. And your gaps between them, they will shrink, and you're going to have a little bit more gap after we install the fence than on the day that we install the fence. So we install the fence, everything will be very tight. The boards itself are going to shrink, and when they do, you're going to have a small gap. The southern yellow pine species, the pressure treated lumber, has a yellow or greenish tint to it. This material is guaranteed for life, never deteriorate or rot. However, it's highly prone to warping, twisting, and shrinking. So with the purchase of this new wood fence, there's some things you got to do to take care of it. And it's not super difficult, but it'll make a big difference in how it looks and how it performs down the road. Staining is very important with pressure treated and cedar. They both need to be protected. There's a difference between how each one of those products weather. Cedar's more stable in our climate here. Cedar will warp, crack, twist less than pressure treated lumber. Aesthetically, that's what you see at first. You're going to see this warping, cracking, splitting, and checking in a few weeks, potentially. The rotting of an untreated wood may be years down the road. So it's very important that we treat even a pressure treated fence and stain it to prevent the warping, cracking, splitting, and checking that would happen with the natural cycle of a wood fence. Here's an example of a fence that's probably 25 years old or older. It doesn't even appear to be properly stained or treated. It may have in the very beginning, but it hasn't been recently. If we look at the top of the pickets, this is deterioration or rotting in the pickets. It's just crumbling apart. And that's to be expected. That's natural weathering of the lumber itself. When it starts to deteriorate like this, you lose the connection in the nail, in the rail. So oftentimes they start to pop out, just like we see here. The nails are coming out and the boards are coming off of the fence. So over the period of time, they have come back here and they've added screws and tried to re-secure to the rail, but even that didn't work because the horizontal rail itself is deteriorating, and so whatever fastener you put in there is going to pull out of that rail, whether it be a screw or a nail. So this fence behind me is a great example of what happens if you don't stain your fence in time. So this fence was built, it weathered through the season, and then they stained it. And as you can tell behind me, there's a lot of warping that have happened with these boards. This is a pressure treated fence, and you're seeing that the boards are bowed and kicked out at the top and the bottom. The twisting and bowing of the boards is because it went through that summer with no stain on it. And so it expanded and contracted. Every time it got wet, it expanded, and then our sun dried it out rapidly. It shrunk quickly, and then it starts to curl in against the grain. And we have this. So here's an example of a fence right down the road from the last one I showed you, built at the same time frame. This one was stained almost right away. Same type of lumber, pressure treated lumber, and you can tell there's far less warping and twisting with this fence than with the other example across the street. And this is because this one was stained right away after it was built. Another question we often get, is my post broke? Is it cracked down the middle? We get people to call us back and they're concerned that their fence is cracking apart. And generally it's on the post that we get this question. So let's take a look at this. Right here we have a post that has a checking through it. This is a check. And so that check is running vertically along the post. That is natural. The integrity of that post is still solid. There's no problems with that post. Characteristically, it looks like it has a crack in it. They call that a check in the industry. The wood is checking. But I can assure you the post is still solid. There's no problem with that post. What to expect with your wood gate? What's going to happen is the gate itself is going to expand and contract. It's going to shrink, naturally start to move a little bit. And over time, you'll have some resistance on the latch. Here currently, this one is lined up very well. There's no issue. But if your gate starts to become difficult to close because the pin is not lined up, that's an adjustment that we can do for you. So you would call us and let us know. These things can be adjusted so that this gate closes like it should. But do expect over time that may move. Not because the posts are settling as much as it's just the wood. The natural characteristics of the wood is moving. And again, thank you so much for making the decision to trust us with your fence project. It'd mean the world to us if you would recommend us to your friends and family. We want to take care of them just as well as we have taken care of you.